Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Welcome back to Gaelic Lives. We're a wee bit further into Ulster final week. The last time we were on, Gerard O'Kane was giving us a neutral angle on Saturday's big game in Clonus. Thankfully today we're joined by Donegal's Rory Kavanagh, a man who has walked that walk and knows exactly what's going through the players' heads to try and see, is Donegal as fanatical as everybody on the outside thinks? Rory, what's it like in the county going forward to another Ulster final?
Well, it's what you would expect. There's a lot of flags around, most houses that you drive past, and around Letterkenny and the surrounding areas where I am. You have the flags out and hanging, and people are looking forward to it. Well, I suppose at the outset it was maybe the two that people had picked, Michael. Donegal and Armagh. If it went to form, that it would be those two, and that's the way it's transpired. But no, there's a good buzz around, and no doubt there's going to be a packed house in Clonus on Saturday.
Rory, I saw you setting up Glentown in a few weeks there on the Thursday nights. You look like a man could still play. Jim wasn't on the phone to try and get another member of the band back together again.
No, that horse is bolted long ago. I was back playing with my club actually last year, Michael. I was playing with the thirds. So I think that's more my level now at this point in my life. Once you're hitting 40, the hamstrings have a tendency to go very easily. I enjoyed the few runouts with my club, I must say, there last year, but that's my lot at this stage.
And all joking aside, would you parking that? Would you love to be running out again at the weekend, because we're probably thinking about a sellout and hopefully a sunny day and a magical day, so I'm sure it's something that it jogs a memory, I would imagine.
Listen, Ulster final day is just one of those days in the calendar, that everybody pencils in. It's just the whole tradition. I'm glad that there were talk before the game that it might be taken out of Clonus and heading to Croke Park, but I'm glad now that it's remained in the provincial ground, because there's just something unique about it, and we've got to experience it obviously last year, coming up that hill in Clonus, and the noise and the colour and the banter between the fans. That it's definitely something special about it. I know from my own playing days, we love going there, and we got to experience both sides of it. During the noughties, we come in the wrong side quite often against Armagh, and then thankfully, when Jim came in 2011, things changed. So it's a special day, and one that the players still really cherish. That Ulster medal. That Ulster medal is huge. It's so hard to get, and it's such a competitive province. The players just fight tooth and nail for it. And ultimately, it's good. There's going to be one happy camp at the end of it come Saturday evening.
I remember being on the pitch after last year's final. I think Donegal had bridged a 5-year gap. And that area in front of the Jerry Arthur stand, you couldn't move. It was just absolutely wall-to-wall people. And that's after 5 years. I'm sure you hope it doesn't happen. But if Armagh were to win this Ulster final, I'm thinking back to 2011 and the famine that Hughes boys ended. What was that like? Was there something, was there real pressure to deliver, or what was that like, Rory? Because Jim had come in and obviously had put a plan together.
I wouldn't say there was pressure. We started off in the preliminary round, and things just, we had built up a bit of momentum from winning Division 2 that year in the league against Laois, and we seem to be having good hitting the ground running come championship, and we were putting real sort of back-to-back performances together. So we knew we were kind of building momentum and we were gaining confidence as a result of that. And we had that good mix of some older heads who had been around and not too successful, coupled with the under-20s who had come in and got to within a kick of the ball winning the All-Ireland final. So we had a good mix. And then obviously you had Jim in that, who gave us all brilliant belief. And, tactically, I suppose, we get up to a level, and, physically and our conditioning, we got up to a level very quickly, that we were competing with other teams. But going into that day, you're right, like we hadn't won Ulster in I think 19 years, so it was a huge occasion. And we played Derry that day, and it was fairly nip and tuck early on. I actually had gone into that final with an ankle injury, and it didn't last till half time. But at the outcome, just that relief, I suppose, was the overriding emotion on the day. To get over the line and deliver and finally land an Ulster medal was absolutely huge for us and huge for the belief within our group, going on down to the All-Ireland series in Croke Park.
I remember Eamon McGee talking about the amount of times that Jim spoke about winning Ulster and the bus going up through Clonus, and him getting into the bus and saying to Eamon, "Can you believe it?" and him saying, "Are you serious?" or words to that effect. So what's that journey home like? Is it just absolutely magical? Because I remember seeing the things on YouTube of the bus pulling into the dam and you just walking through the town, and just really memorable scenes, I suppose.
You're right. Like we had been starved, and the people at Donegal and supporters, I suppose, especially, had been going to so many Ulster finals. Like I had played in 3 during the noughties, and coming out on the wrong side against Armagh. I suppose Donegal supporters have become accustomed to that. So that outpouring of relief and joy and pride among members of your own club, your family, as you said, taking the cup back into the diamond there at Donegal town and thousands of people there, it was magical, and so luckily for Donegal have been quite accustomed now to Ulster final days in the last 10 to 15 years, and I've appeared in quite a few. So it's familiar territory, but nonetheless, when you're playing in big days, against the All-Ireland champions, as we will be on Saturday, and if you were to get over the line, there would be, those medals are cherished, and that's why, there's going to be a packed house on Sunday on Saturday to see 2 of the top teams in the country to go on head to head,
And obviously the preliminary round this year, and with that extra game, what's that like in terms of preparation? Back then, it's probably something similar now with Jim, but do you have to taper it differently? And then I suppose you've played 3 games, Rory, and you've still nothing to show for it. You've still Armagh to take on, so it's nearly it's a sort of a mammoth championship for the preliminary team.
It is I suppose when you're playing, you're in that cycle, of training really hard. But I made this point before, most of Donegal's, and the way the season is now, most of Donegal's hard work was done, prior to the league, in my opinion. They would have, just looking at their fitness levels throughout the whole league and the way they attacked those early rounds of the league, Donegal were flying, and it was obvious that they had a serious body of work and conditioning under their belt, and they were away in a training camp in the Middle East as well before Christmas. So they had a massive amount of work done before starting league, because it is so condensed. You're going from your league straight into the championship. So it's a matter of having that there body of work built up, and then it's almost maintaining that throughout the league and into the championship, because I don't believe you could have done what we done in our day, where you had maybe 4 weeks, maybe 5 in some occasions between league and championship. And there was almost, right, that's the league done, and now we're going to start our championship preparations and we're going to train really hard. I don't think you can do that anymore with the current schedule.
There's no space. There's no space for it.
There's no space to do it. Like, there's no space to do it. So, it's almost the off season. Them boys are keeping themselves in really good condition and in the gym and maintaining strength levels and fitness levels and things like that. So, yeah, to answer your question, like, in terms of the preliminary round, that's why I think Donegal identified, squad depth as a big priority for McGuinness in the off season, like, and why he went, to get Michael Murphy back and to get Oran McFadden Ferry back and to get these types of players back into the squad, because he knew the probably attritional nature of league and Division 1 and then into an Ulster Championship campaign, which is as competitive as it comes, like, and the likelihood would be that you'll pick up niggles along the way and injuries. And, he's added serious depth now. And Donegal, in years gone by where we didn't start with our starting midfield and an Ulster Championship opener and didn't start, with, an all-star and corner forward, like, we wouldn't have got over the line. But because we've added to that squad depth, we're able to kind of soften those blows and still get over the line in a highly competitive Ulster Championship.
I'd asked Conor Laverty the question after the Down game about preparing for Sean Patton, and he thought they'd cope with him quite well from the fact that it was only whenever they got caught out by not playing in front that led to the goal. But you're probably one of the lucky people, Rory. You've always had him on your side between St Eunan's and obviously Donegal. But is it the kickout's just such a weapon? Is it something he just practices all the time, or like he's not massively big? He doesn't take a long run up, but it's something that I think the rest of Ireland are just jealous of at this stage.
I know, it's certainly a weapon. Like, back to your point, does he work? He does. Like, he works really, really hard on his kicking, and away from the pitch as well. Like, his leg strength. He does a lot of work in the gym, obviously, and maintains that power that he has in those quads. When sometimes it's only 2 or 3 steps back and he can deliver a ball 70 meters to somebody on the run, like, and that's been used again. And I suppose it came to the fore against Down, where we got our Paddy McBurty's goal, off that long kick out, one long, and we transitioned and were able to work it up and get a goal. So it's a huge threat. I was seriously impressed with Ethan Rafferty's, to be honest with you, Michael, against Tyrone. Like,
he lost 1 or 2 maybe or something.
I think the stats were something outrageous. Like, he got 18 out of 19 away or something like that, and that's against a good Tyrone team. So you can imagine the body of work that he's put in to be able to unseat Blaine Hughes, who's had a tremendous year last year. So, like, I see that battle as being probably really even. Like, Armagh have made serious gains in that. Like, so Donegal will have their work cut out to get any hands on his kick out, because, the way that it was, the variety of his kicks versus Tyrone, one's zimming through the arc and one's wide and one's long. There was great variety again in his kicks, and it's a great any time you're getting those sort of retention rates, what a platform it is for your attack, like.
And from a Donegal point of view, like, as somebody who's played in that midfield area in Clonus, is it a case of, well, we don't know if Michael Murphy will start? That's the first point. But is it a case where Jim might need the 5 across the middle? Langan, McGee, Murphy, Thompson, Huey. Is that the sort of challenge he's going to need to bring to Rafferty? Because, as you said, Rory, like, Rafferty sort of dictated that game. And I suppose as a Donegal man, you'll be hoping that he can't do that this time. So it's a serious aspect of the game this weekend.
It's huge. Like Armagh took a really aggressive zonal approach, to Tyrone's kickouts, and they kind of done something similar that what you were talking about Donegal might do. Where they put big Callum O'Neill and Oisin O'Neill and another couple big men out in that long line, and like they really cleaned them out during certain spells of that game, and that was another platform that they had. So
and Morgan's a good kicker as well.
And Morgan's are one of the best keepers in the country, and he was struggling. So ended up, nothing was on short, nothing was on between the lines, and he ended up having to kick it out to those big men a lot of the time. So you're right. Both teams, that'll be a battleground, because both teams will look to upset the other and try and take that advantage away. Because, if you're having between 18 and 20 kickouts a game, and you're winning 90 or above 90%, like what a platform that is for in terms of possession to attack the other team. So both teams are going to be targeting each other, and that'll be fascinating to see whether Big McGee is able to come back in. Is he fit enough to last a full game? I don't know. Langan is starting to play and contribute in a way we know he can. And it'll be, you have Thompson who can operate in that line. Murphy, if he's called upon, can get out into that line. So it'll be interesting to see, do Donegal mix up between the man-to-man and the zonal approach, and what way they'll go at, and equally so Armagh on the other side, because that's going to be a great spectacle to watch how that unfolds.
We were up last night in Sister Sarah's, and Davy was looking after us and all the rest. But the big talking point, Rory, was Michael Murphy walking behind the band, or Michael Murphy coming on with 20 minutes to go. And I remember being in Ballybofey that day that he came on in the league final, the league game against Armagh, and TV wouldn't have done it justice. The noise was unbelievable. Is that a real decision for Jim? And also the fact that this final might go to extra time, the potential of when you play your ace of hearts, I suppose.
Well, look, to me, if he's fit, he starts, but again, we don't know what the situation. Mm-hmm. I think we saw in last year's Ulster final, one band, Donegal had 16 men in the parade before the game, and then Paddy McBurty casually jogs off, so
main games are class.
Main games are brilliant. McGuinness loves the rabbit out of the hat moments, so you would expect a bit of that as well, to see what surprise each other pulls in the other, so but to me, now Murphy, if he's fit, he has to play, because he's an unbelievable dead ball kicker, and he's been contributing well, in general play. I thought, in general play, he's looked sharp and looked fit, and he's just, to me, just contributing too much. So he plays if he's fit. There's no doubt about that in my mind. He has to start if he's fit.
And we move on to Armagh just before we sum up. And in terms of the rivalry, like you said, Rory, you played them in finals, and they got the better of you. And then obviously last year Donegal are Ulster champions, but Armagh obviously have the biggest prize of all. But where's that rivalry at? Because we love rivalry, but like McGeeney versus McGuinness, a title up for grabs. It's, regardless of the All Ireland, it's something to really, really look forward to on Saturday. That real rivalry.
Aye, and it is it is a rivalry now, and you've seen it in the match earlier in the league that you talked about. Armagh turned up that day to McCool Park wanting to record a victory as well and lay down a marker ahead of the championship. There's no doubt about it. So, will it count for much come Saturday? Probably not. I think Armagh now have got to a level where they're really strong mentally. They know what they're about, and they're really, really well conditioned and well coached. You can see that, in all aspects of the game. If there is a team that can match Donegal in terms of physicality and just pure conditioning levels, it's going to be Armagh. So it is a rivalry now, absolutely. Like, both teams are going to go at it. Then there's no love lost either, but between both sets of players, I would imagine. So it sets it up lovely. The All Ireland champions versus last year's Ulster champions. So, and Donegal wanting to go one better again. So no, it's one we all can't wait for.
Yeah, funny. Aaron McKay at last week's press day, he says, like, Donegal have got the cup we want, and we've got the cup they want. So you sort of sum it up in a sentence. But
that gives you an indication of how highly they value an Ulster medal, like, you know, and McGuinness has never made any sort of bones about it. Like, Ulster is the be all and end all to him, and he gets that point across to the players every single year. You know, they play for two competitions in championship, and that's an Ulster medal and that's an All Ireland medal. So, like, they put everything in, and it was the same in my time with Jim. We put everything into Ulster, like, and back in our time, it was trying to topple probably Tyrone. And now that attention now, the talk early on in the season would have been all about Armagh, because they know that they have got to a level, you know, ticking the boxes tactically, physically, you know, the condition levels, you know, they're ticking all them boxes now. Like, so Jim and the boys would have known from early doors the likelihood is this is going to be our man and an Ulster final. So he would have been preparing for them. But to me, there's nothing between the teams, Michael. I think, if anything, Armagh are probably slight favourites going into it. And I'm not just saying that, you know, as any sort of throwaway comment, but I'm saying it because I think, you know, Keelan McGonigal and these boys, you know, who have been such important players, maybe not you know, one of the superstars, but really unsung, and what the shield that he provided throughout the league, and the defensive cover and the ability to run hard and carry ball, you know, and being one of them big men around the middle as well for kickouts. I think we've missed him, like, in terms of our defensive part of our game, and really I think we haven't replaced him, like. So, you know, that along with maybe McGee and his fitness, and maybe Oisín Gallen just not maybe quite at the form that he was in last year. Maybe he'll explode into life on Saturday. I'm hoping, for our point of view, he does. But to me, Armagh are slight favourites because of those things, you know, and the way that they've been able to absorb losses and still go about their business has been hugely impressive. Like, an Ethan Rafferty coming in and delivering that performance against Armagh, and the form of probably Connaughty and Grugan, you know, Big Oisín O'Neill came in and had a great game the last day too. Like, so, you know, to me, they're probably slight favourites, but there's nothing between them, like, nothing between them.
You're just hoping that it's not going to be the day whenever they have the Donegal 2011 emotion of ending the famine. You just hope it's not this time.
Not just yet. No, listen, I mean, you know, getting Murphy back was a huge one for us, like, and that, you know, that's raised everybody's, I've no doubt, in that camp, the standards, you know, just the leadership, the calm and presence he brings. You know, I could imagine how that's rubbing off on the rest of the group. So look, hopefully the gods are kind to him and to the rest of the Donegal boys. But look, it's going to be an epic battle. You know, there's no doubt about it. You know, people are talking about extra time again, and you know, you wouldn't be surprised. Like, you just wouldn't be surprised, because they're so evenly matched, and you know, the key matchups, like, you know, who our man markers go on, like who the McCall's normally been designated to go after their number one attacker. But when you have two or three of them operating at a really high level, then that becomes a bit of an issue. Like, Finbar Rorty, does he start? Massive day, like, for a young 19-year-old, you know, to step in but he's been playing brilliantly, and Jim has brilliant faith in him, and as do all the Donegal supporters. And Mogan, like, so those three against Armagh's best three attackers, that'll be something to watch out for. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a late change sprung somewhere, in terms of a man-to-man matchup. Like, we've been known to do that too.
Just before I let go, just on that point about Ciaran McGonigal, like, I remember doing a wee bit of work last year in a preview, and I think he'd played like nearly every minute of Jim's tenure being back. And as you say, a lot of people on the outside, don't really see it, but and it's probably a wee bit, and I think it was actually Eamon McGee last night touched on it with Kieran Moore, that, and you would obviously know Kieran, but they nearly put him into a completely new position. There seems to be just that. Jim seems to have a sniff for the person who can be that sitting player, and they are so important. Like remember against Derry, there's sort of a half goal chance you could probably call it, and McGonigal got his foot to it. So it's just that area through the middle where those players are so important. Is that why he's a loss, because he was a never present in that system?
And like, I don't think people realise the work that he's doing out of possession of the ball. You see it when he's on the ball and he's driving forward and he's taking men on, he's contributing to the attack. But I don't see, if people realise the work that he's doing off the ball, covering across the lines, covering line breaks, getting double ups, contacts, tackles, and then getting up the field again, and then maybe it breaking down, getting back again. There's, he is obviously a huge engine, like, and it's that probably selflessness that's the hallmark of all winning teams. Like, you need players in your team that are going to dog it out, like, for you, and almost do the work of maybe two or three others at the same time. So, he's a really down to earth guy, but like, to me, I'd worry without him, because just because of the body of work that he gets through in games, like, that's massive for Donegal, and we haven't been the same defensively without him. There's no doubt about it.
Rory Kavanagh, thanks a million for your contributions, and I'm sure you'll be looking forward to the rest of the week. You're thinking Armagh are favourites. You're hoping for an upset, and you've told us that the late change to the Donegal programme won't be Rory Kavanagh. That we can be. We're totally on that page.
Of that one, Michael. Yeah.
Rory, thanks a million for your time.
Pleasure.
And folks, you can tune back in later on Monday, and you'll hear all about the action at Clonus and on our Monday podcast. And also, don't forget to jump on to GaelicLife.com with all the Ulster final preparations, both ladies and men's. Thanks, Rory.
No problem, Michael. Best of luck. Thank you.
So in part one of the podcast, we heard the Donegal story a la Rory Kavanagh, and we're now jumping on. We'll hear a word from our sponsors, the Everglades Hotel, and then we will talk with Charlie Vernon, all things Armagh.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of London Derry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Charlie, thanks for coming on. And I suppose Armagh man living in Derry, so you've got a wee bit of interest both ways. So you're obviously still keeping a huge tabs on Armagh, I would imagine.
Oh, I know, you never let that go. Big year last year. You have to sing when you're winning, Michael.
Here, it must have been magical just for that to happen, because I suppose the whole thing about not winning Ulster and the hard luck stories, and then all of a sudden Aidan Forker standing with the biggest prize that you can possibly win. So it must have been brilliant.
It was an amazing turnaround. Like, I did a bit of work for BBC at the Ulster final last year, and leaving Clonus that day, there was no chance in hell I could see Armagh doing anything. I thought that was just a very I thought that defeat was going to be very damaging on them. I just thought it was such the level of disappointment, given that they'd gone to the penalties the year before as well. And then to have that disappointment again, going extra time and penalties, and leaving Clonus that day, I certainly didn't see a bright future for the team. But listen, if ever there was a lesson in resilience and perseverance, like that was it in terms of knuckling down and basically going out and giving their best the next day. And I think the game actually, funnily enough, against Derry was a bit of a turning point, I think, for the squad. That it gave them a bit of a belief. They played very well that day. They just were on it all over the pitch that day, and I think that sort of spurred them on, then gave them a wee bit of an injection of confidence then. And obviously, in the Kerry game was huge. Last year, the semi-final, and then obviously the Galway to take down the final too. So, no, all credit to them. Like it was a hard road, and I suppose they're back at it for more this year.
And as Rory Kavanagh, we were chatting to him earlier for the first part of the pod, and like, ironically, he played on a Donegal team that ended the famine, and he just speaks about how memorable it was. But I'm sure you're fed up hearing people saying you played on the last Armagh team doing Ulster. You want that to change, but what was that like, Charlie? Because like it was 5 or 6 years after Armagh won the All Ireland, and here you are with an Armagh jersey on. You have an under 21 medal in your pocket, and you're in the senior squad, and you're standing on the step. So it must have been brilliant back then.
Okay, listen, and I suppose I remember Gareth Burns in '99 winning Ulster. That was a big day for Armagh folk, and I remember being at that match, and that was a big event, and I suppose we were very fortunate. I was probably heading into my teenage years at that point, in terms of looking up to those players, and then that sort of golden era of Armagh football where they sort of won Ulster regularly and were competing in All-Ireland finals, and I suppose right up until 2002 they were getting beaten by the team that were winning All-Irelands, even in semi-finals or whatever. Just think of those great Meath teams and Galway teams, sort of 98, 99. Even 2001, Armagh beaten by Galway, then went on to win All-Ireland as well. So those are great memories, but that team had a huge influence on my generation in terms of the boys that were coming after, and then to get the opportunity to share a changing room with all those sort of heroes or idols of mine that you'd have been looking up to, was a great experience for me personally. And then obviously the management team, Joe Kernan and John McCluskey and Paul Grimley, and those boys would have been still knocking about, and so that was an experience for me in itself. But as I say, Armagh at that stage in 2008 were definitely looking at competing at the All-Ireland level in terms of, they'd been thereabouts in 05, 06, 07, like they were winning Division 1 national leagues, and an Ulster title probably didn't mean as much to the players at that point in time, but I can tell you as time passed, it meant more to me in terms of whenever the famine came and our record in Ulster wasn't good in terms of even winning a first round game. So you take success when you get it, and I suppose I have very fond memories of that particular squad and that panel and the quality of players that were in it.
And you're coming in from, obviously, like, you had success with Queens, and like obviously the year group below you won a minor Ulster title, so there was sprinklings of success. But what was it about the older players in that dressing room? Was it just them welcoming you into the setup, or was it how they went about things? Because that was, as you say, you looked up to them, but how do they drive that? Is it just the standards, or what is it about them?
I suppose it's a mix of things. Aside from the quality players that there were, like you're talking about guys like Roland Clark, Stephen McDonald, Oisin McConville, like guys that had real quality. What was the backbone of that team was their will to win and their will to prepare to win. And I suppose it taught me a lot of lessons in terms of what it takes, to compete at that level. I suppose McGeeney's big thing was some people think they're preparing, but it's only when they see somebody who's actually really competing at the top level, they realise, Jesus, there's more in the tank here. I have more to give. And that was probably an insight that I got initially, was like, this is a bit of a step up here. Like, this isn't just training Tuesday, Thursday, and a match of the weekend. Like, this is intense, But I know boys, a lot of the boys in that panel would vouch for this, is that the in-house matches in that particular panel were every bit as tough as any championship match we played. And I think that was the measure, the way that team was successful, in terms of they were competing every night. And I think even that, current Armagh panel in terms of the when you get a good quality panel and everybody's competing for jerseys, the management job, is a lot easier in the sense that you don't have to drive because all the boys are competing with each other to get jerseys. And it was very much the message for me whenever I came in was like, if you're good enough, you'll play. It doesn't matter what age you are. And that was always very encouraging for me to hear in terms of no matter who you're marking and training, like days you're up against Paul McGrain, man with multiple All-Stars and All-Ireland medals, and rocking around athletic grounds on a Tuesday night on a training pitch. That was a bit surreal at times, but listen, if you give as good as you got, they respected you for it, and that's the way it was.
And if there's any Fermanagh listeners tuned in, like that's the one that got away for them, and it obviously went to a replay and you won it, and like there's such a fine line. But what do you sort of remember about the drawn game? Because I suppose sometimes they always say you learn more in defeat or you learn more in a draw, that you took forward then to win that replay, because I think he's won it comfortably enough in the end up in the replay. So was there big lessons to be learned that time?
Well, if truth be told, Fermanagh should have beaten us the first day. I think my memory of that game was they missed a lot of free kicks, they missed a lot of dead balls, and if they had any efficiency in terms of even their free kicks in front of the goals that day, they would have put us out the gate. So I think the feeling after that match was we were just very grateful. We hadn't played that well, and we knew there was far more in us, and we were probably just that grateful that we got a second chance to do. Probably should have done the first day, but I suppose, listen, Malachy Rourke was involved in that team, the Fermanagh team, and he was obviously, he had the knack of getting the best out of them. And I suppose, unfortunately for Fermanagh listeners, that was a golden opportunity for them that day, because I think just the level of our performance that day, we were there for the taking, but they just didn't manage to put us away. But we managed to turn up the second day.
And then the current Armagh group, then they had their days in Division 3 and Division 2, and Geezer, is he there a decade now? Is that the magic number? Is it something like that? But like for him to still be there and driving that on, it says an awful lot, because well, there was obviously the vote where he was nearly voted out, but to be still there and still driving that says something.
Yeah, no, I suppose it tells you how highly thought of he is in Armagh, and like he'd be the first to admit there's some dark days, like some very, very poor days, that defeated by teams you should have been beaten, and a lot of soul searching, and a lot of learning sort of coming out of it. Just things weren't right on the day when they needed to be right, and I suppose Kieran's probably learned a lot over the years in terms of his approach to games. Sometimes we were maybe just too hyped up or overthinking things rather than just relaxing and playing. And I think in terms of, it's maybe a lesson in terms of, like, there's other counties. I remember speaking to different guys in other counties, and they said, listen, there's no chance any other manager would have got the time that he got, to be allowed to achieve. People are very quick to put you out the door these days at club and county level when success doesn't happen very quickly. And listen, you can see it even in other sports and soccer and all the rest. Like, people are quick to change the manager, but sometimes that's not the answer. In terms of, a bit of loyalty goes a long way as well. And listen, I'd have been critical of the way the team was playing, and the tactics that were being used at certain matches, certain times, that they were allowing bad teams, they were keeping bad teams in games by their approach, and I'd have been very critical at times of that. But listen, you can't. They went the full way last year, and all credit to them. As I say, like, such a lesson in perseverance and resilience, to just keep coming back and keep putting their best foot forward.
And you're living in Magherafelt, and you're coaching around the club, and you're obviously seeing, Lynchy and Clucky and them boys picking up Ulster medals with Derry. So you're seeing that side of things. But when did you feel it begin to turn for Armagh? Because there's obviously the penalty shootouts and everything went after that. But is there a stage whenever you started to think they are a serious team, they do belong in Ulster finals, they do belong challenging for Sam, or was it sort of gradual for you?
I suppose there was a period of time where, in your heart of hearts, you knew they just weren't good enough. You knew that they just had something missing that was going to get them over the line. But definitely against Derry 2 years ago, when the match went to extra time, like, I just think if Armagh had a wee bit more belief and confidence in themselves going down that final stretch, like Shane McGuigan pulled Derry up single-handedly that day to keep it outstanding, But if it was Armagh, just they had opportunities, they just didn't take them. Or just a team that just didn't quite have that final piece of the puzzle to get over the line. But. So I did see a change in that day to say they were every bit as good as Derry and probably should have beaten a very good Derry team that day. I thought Derry were definitely there for the take. Obviously went to penalties as well.
I had Rosie beats out that day. We were hanging on, so you were just hoping. So the game was literally sitting.
It was just
there.
Yeah, great. It was a great sort of in terms of tense and sort of enthralling battle in terms of the outcome. You were sort of sitting on the edge of your seat that way. Sometimes the quality of football and the pace of the play maybe wasn't brilliant, but certainly in terms of the edge of the seat, the last 10 minutes, it had that. Then again, last year, the Ulster final last year, like that was a brilliant game in terms of the score taken. That was taking that game was top quality. Like I think it was Shane and Conor O'Donnell and Oshie and Gallen at one end, and like Sir Rain O'Neill and Rory Kavanagh and Soupy and all those boys at the other end. It was end-to-end stuff. Really enjoyed last year's Ulster final. Obviously, the result, penalties again, didn't go our way, but it was no. You could definitely see green shoots in terms of especially even the depth of the panel, like over those matches and those different boys getting injured and subs coming on weren't weakening the team, they're actually strengthening the team, and that was one of the key. That's one of the key strengths, I think, of this current Armagh panel is that they have quite a bit of depth.
Aye, and funny, I was up at a talk show in Letterkenny the other night, and Eamon McGee talked about that. He says Armagh always seem to want the graph to be going up as the game goes on.
Yeah,
and that's what you're talking about there. Like, and then like Soupy Campbell came on, Charlie. I think was it something like 7 minutes to go in the Tyrone game, and I remember the commentator saying something along the lines of, "Is there going to be enough time?"
Yeah,
but you nearly sense that the supporters, the players know that Soupy's on here. There's a chance, Jamar Hall's tagging on points, Cian McConville. They seem to sense that there's another gear as such, or maybe gear is the wrong word, but they seem to sense there's something else.
Aye, but listen, I suppose those boys are coming on as subs, like they're trying to nail down a jersey for the next day, so they're coming on with a point to prove, Sometimes that can be a double-edged sword in terms of boys are trying to overperform and doing that to make the wrong decisions, But Armagh definitely, there's a maturity about them there in terms of their approach that seem to be able to make the right decisions, especially when it's crunch time, and suppose like all these matches, there's fine margins that decide them, and I suppose that's maybe. I know it's a frustrating thing. I know Kieran McGinney has talked about this, in times where you lose the match by a point after extra time and penalties, and you're seen as the Egypt, and then the boy the other sideline, he's seen as the genius, and the reality is there's very little between them, and like on any given match, it's a kick of the ball separating teams. The margins are small, and I think Armagh have just got better at managing those margins, especially when it comes to crunch time. And like they left it late against Tyrone, like it was looking hurry enough at times there coming towards the stretch, but it was certainly entertaining if nothing else.
I think I remember Geezer's quote. It was either genius or a gobshite. I think it was something along the lines, and it just shows you, he just says what he thinks. But Charlie, that game you talked about there, like I was watching it at home, and like you saw no way that Tyrone was going to win it. All of a sudden, the 2 pointers were a big factor, but like it's probably a game that Armagh a few years ago would have lost. But how much going into Saturday? How much did they take out of those last 10 minutes that they were able to? It wasn't an average team they beat. It was a Tyrone team, as you say, under Malachi Rourke, who you had the experience of coming up against. How much did that last 5 minutes do for them heading back to Clonus? It has to be massive.
It's a huge injection of confidence like that in terms of, I remember Paddy Rourke when he was managing us, he referred to whenever you win All Ireland, it just gives you an extra layer. It gives you an extra couple of inches in your step in terms of when it comes to that, you've been there, you've navigated it, you know what to do. Like arguably, like any player knows what to do, like they know where to give the ball, they know what to do, like, but once you've won it, it just gives you that extra layer of confidence and belief that listen, you've been there before. It's a tough situation, but you manage it out. And I suppose Dublin were the best exponents of that, in terms of when they're under pressure, that's nearly when it brought the best out in them, in terms of they nearly relished that bit where they were tested, really, really tested, in terms of, right, you have to dig out a point from nowhere here. We have to create the play, get them on the right position, let them pull the trigger from the right spot. Rather than, as opposed to panicking and rushing it and saying, right, boys, we need to go at breakneck speed here to get up about the ball at the pitch, and they end up losing it. Being in a hurry to lose the ball. But it was something that was, I suppose, very satisfying, I'd say, from management to see, where they'd have rehearsed that time after time on a training pitch, to try and create the opportunity, create an overload, create an overlap, create a gap for somebody to go at. And obviously, you player of the quality of Soupy, like Soupy's a quality finisher, and if you give him half a yard at all, he's going to slip it over. And when you have boys of that quality, the job's a bit easier. All you have to do is give him the ball and let him do his thing. But no, I'd say from a management perspective, I'd say they're very satisfied with how the team didn't really show any outward signs of panic anyway, in terms of, but control the game, control possession, start throwing to the ball, and then created the opportunity whenever they needed it.
Like Ross McQuillan's tackle that time, if he times it wrongly, it's a free in, and we're having a different conversation now.
100%.
And Ross McQuillan was an impact man last year, and now they're going to have a job getting the jersey off him.
Absolutely, and I've seen a huge improvement in Ross, as well as a couple of other younger players. But
but that moment of that match, like, it could have changed everything.
And listen, if you rewind some of the matches that they've played in the past, maybe 3 to 4 years, unfortunately for Ross, the video maybe wouldn't have been good in terms of discipline. Ross might have been giving him maybe a cheap enough free in that area of the pitch at that time in the game. But he's obviously learned from that. The coaches have been on, and he's learned from that. Obviously his father probably gave him a couple of bits of words of advice too. A damn good player too, he was, Martin.
But he's got about 1,000 Railway Cup medals.
Aye, yeah, I'd say he holds the record, I would say.
Him and Tony Scullion seem to debate who's got the most, so they were in that era.
But no, Ross has been very, very good this year in terms of saw a few elite games and stuff, but pace to burn. But just that, you say that wee bit between the ears where you're making the right call. Listen, it's fine lines. You're going for the ball. Sometimes you can miss it. You give away a free, handy enough. But he seems to definitely have improved, and he's not the only one in terms of those young players that have been on that panel that have improved.
And before we go into the sort of the final itself, to sum up, what's your sort of take on Donegal? Like, they obviously ran Galway very close, and you've obviously edged out Galway in the final, so they're not 1,000 miles away. But what have you sort of made of them this year? They're back in our Ulster final again.
Yeah, no, I've been very impressed with them. I've actually thought they were better this year than they were last year. I saw them up close against Armagh and Ballybuffet. Now, even though Armagh maybe weren't brilliant that day, but Donegal were hugely impressed me that day. They've a good mix there in terms of they've great height and strength around the middle of the pitch. But obviously, these new rules, the ball's coming to the middle third a bit more often. But their pace of movement from defence to attack was the thing that sort of stood out for me in terms of that transition play between. I'm just thinking the likes of Mogan and Moore and Darrow Boyle, these boys coming at breakneck pace. You run at angles, McHugh and these boys, and they're just nearly impossible to defend against. Like, them boys are coming, carrying the ball hard, and getting the ball from A to B very, very quickly, and they're just creating chances for Gallen and McBrady and stuff up front. It was hugely impressive to watch. And then obviously when they don't have the ball, they've kind of got the same sort of Jim McGuinness qualities in terms of aggressive in the tackle, sort of zonal defence, and difficult to play against. Hard to get at. So listen, no, they're a serious outfit.
I remember the Patrick McBeardy point that day. I think it was the fourth score of the game, but it was sort of Conor O'Donnell and Moore. I think that's probably the one you're thinking about as well, where they went right through the middle, and it was a sort of a half goal chance for McBeardy. He blasted over at the river end. It was like scary how fast they worked it, and that's maybe the one you're thinking of.
Yeah, like Armagh, they literally couldn't put a glove on them, couldn't put a hand on them. Just the pace to move the ball, and obviously then, like, Donegal had a few very strong performances at the start of the league, and then Jim's obviously then said, right, we maybe need to put a lid in this here. We're just not going to get carried away with ourselves here. So
he relegated Derry first.
Huh?
He relegated Derry first. I thought he should have. I wish he had pulled the handbrake in Ballyshannon.
Aye.
But they sort of had to do that. Like they obviously timed their run, Charlie. That's the point you're making.
Aye, no, the record was clear. Like they went for broke at the start. They've obviously done a lot of work early on in terms of their fitness and all. They were at a very, very high level. But it's a tricky one for management, because you can put the handbrake on and put it into a lower gear, like, but sometimes it's hard to get back out of it again, but sometimes it's that managing that can be tricky. But I suppose no better man than Jim McGuinness. I'm not going to advise him.
Aye, funny, that's something that Rory Kavanagh touched on, the fact that back probably in his era of playing for Donegal, there was that window between the league and championship was like a sort of a mini ramp up part of the season, and that's not there anymore. So you sort of have to have your bank done, I suppose.
Aye, no, there's no opportunity for doing any major fitness work once the games are coming thick and fast, because you see yourself, even the injuries, and even a small injury, given how compact the calendar is, like if you tweak a hamstring or a groin, like you're missing 3 or 4 games, like easy.
Mm-hmm. That could be your season.
Aye, that's it. Because in like a very competitive panel, like somebody comes in, takes their chance, play as well. Like, why would a manager play if you've been injured and out? Not unless you're an absolutely outstanding player, but like if you're anyway sort of borderline at all, any wee nick, any wee injury at all, it's kind of throws you out. But that's why how important it is to have your pre-season done, so that you're robust enough to hit the full season, hit the ground running. But there's very little. I'd say there's very little actual physical training that's done between all these games. Like it's probably mostly the focus, I'd say, is recovery, and very tactical rather than any sort of physical work. But I miss those days. we did about 3 pre-seasons and we were still out before May.
Looking ahead to Saturday, like you're probably like the rest of Ireland. You assume it's going to be really tight. You're not ruling out extra time or penalties or that type of, how competitive the game will be. But where do you think the main areas, for Donegal to win it or Armagh to win it? What's the major ones, or is it the kick out thing, or do we overuse that analysis sometimes? How do you sort of see it?
I'd say Jim McGuinness will learn a lot from the Tyrone game, watching the Tyrone match back in terms of Armagh. Like Armagh got a lot of easy possession from kickouts. Like Tyrone my view, Tyrone let Armagh have the ball quite easily. I think Ethan kicked the right few, the corner back. I can't see Donegal, allowing Armagh to do that. So therefore, you're talking about getting long kicks out. Obviously, Patton at one end, Ethan Rafferty at the other. It's going to be missiles firing left, right, and centre. That'll be entertaining to see, because even the length of those boys kick, you're literally starting an attack from the length of it. Like you can actually create an attack from the length that some of those boys can get in the ball, like especially if you have a wee bit of a breeze behind you. But listen, where's going to be one? It's going to be one like largely around the decision making in front of the goals. Like who can get the shots off, who can get their efficiency in front of goals at a very high level. Like Donegal have been brilliant at it. Armagh have kind of dipped in and out of it. But I can't see much between them. Like because I think Armagh's going to be very hungry for this one. I do think so. Like in terms of this is the box that hasn't been ticked yet. Like this team hasn't. There's no Ulster medals in that changing room. Versus the Ulster medals, the number of Ulster medals that's in Donegal's changing room, and I think it's a big one. I think for Kieran McGeeney personally, because I'm not sure if, in terms of his record against Jim McGuinness in the championship, especially, maybe I just know there's been no love lost there in terms of the rivalry and there'll be certainly nobody holding back in terms of trying to win this one, and I think that makes it all the more intriguing in terms of the fact that there's a couple of subplots and that rivalry that has gone even from those guys were players. Donegal, Armagh would have been like Armagh sort of won a lot at the expense of Donegal in terms of he's in the early 2000s and coming along.
And Jim would have spoke about that, about the hurt of going to Clonus, or sorry, I remember they went to Croke Park in 2004 and got hammered. So it's there. Yeah.
No, there's a couple of big games that in that era where Armagh just had the edge over them, and then it's fair to say Donegal have had the edge over Armagh in relation to more recent times. All Ireland quarterfinals, Ulster Championship games, Ulster finals, like Donegal have managed to squeeze Armagh out on most of those more recent encounters, and that's not something that'll go unnoticed in the Armagh changing room either, you know.
And if Geezer and the lads are trying to work out a plan for Patton, like Conor Laverty sort of managed it fairly well. Obviously, the goal changed the game, and then on the other side of it, if Donegal are going to maybe park men across the middle to sort of undo what you talked about, Charlie, the easy ball that they got.
Yeah.
Could tactics potentially go out the window and we're down to a good old fashioned baiting match for the breaking ball? Or is that too lazy? Or could it be could that be what we see on Saturday?
Potentially, like I suppose the only difficulty is like if you're going to push up and stop short kickouts, like if Armagh draw Donegal men right up to the 21 and put, in theory, put 4 or 5 men up short. Well, if Donegal are having a policy of there's no short kickouts, well, that therein lays opportunity for Armagh to put it out over those boys' heads to get behind the numbers, So there's double-edged sword there in relation to right. Yes, you can have your policy if we push up no matter what, they're getting nothing cheap. But with that, Armagh can use that to their advantage in terms of getting in behind them. So you might see something like that. I'd imagine they'll sort of go pretty zonal in terms of, I suppose you think back to Derry's match against Donegal last year with fought too high, kickouts going over their head, and then you're defending, running towards your own goals, which is never a good idea. They'll want to stay deep and then sort of meet them coming because that negates their, the advantage you have in the running game. Whereas if you're facing the boys coming to you, you don't have any ground to make up. You're not trying to get in front of them. You're not running with your back to you're not running facing your own goal trying to defend it. I'd imagine that positional sense, like that's why I think it'll probably be zonal and long kickouts predominantly. And I suppose don't underestimate the power of Murphy's ability to win ball there too, because people would have said, "Oh, Murphy's back and he's going to be inside, full forward," but he's a great target for a kick out. Like he's him and Langan and Thompson and the plenty of options there to pop the ball high. But again, Armagh's decent enough around the middle too. I know they've Creeley there at the minute, and now
Grimley's possibly in the way back. We don't know. We'll know on Saturday.
There's a few men sort of missing there just from around the middle, for Armagh in terms of even I think Conor Mackin would have played in around the middle last year too, Kieran Mackin and stuff. But Callum O'Neill had a great game the last day, so it'll be interesting to see does Kieran give him a nod for the Ulster final or not. He had a brilliant game the last day, but relatively new at that level. Like.
And then if you're down, like you think it'll possibly come down to those big moments? Is it down to can somebody tie down Dara Whale, or does Donegal have a fresh set of legs they can bring on to sort out Sippy? Like, that's how fine a margin it could potentially be that you need to keep a few eggs for later on.
I suppose the thing about you talk about Dara Whale, he's outstanding player, very very mobile and very hard to pin down, but Donegal seem to have so many of those type of players. Like I mentioned, the two O'Donnells there is, and even the boys coming from deep, Moore and Mogan, like the pace those boys have, incredible. And I suppose the thing I like about them too as players, that they're not afraid to take you on. Like they're 1-on-1, they're going for your shoulder, they're going past you. No, it's not great as you're sitting in an Armagh shirt and trying to defend your own goal, and Mogan's coming at you at 100 mile an hour. It's hard to know what to do. Listen, even Connody's been a huge find for Armagh especially last year too. He's just a real threat.
What an All-Ireland final he had. He more or less nailed on as Younger Player of the Year on that performance alone. He was amazing.
So he Armagh have been sort of relying on the likes of him to break lines. Him and even Dara McMullen there is obviously a new player in this year. Jarry O'Byrne's maybe come from half back, but those boys have been getting tasters. They haven't getting maybe full games. They've been getting bits and pieces, and Kieran's kind of tempting them with action and trying to keep boys on board, giving them game time and things. But it's certainly a headache selection for the amount of players that's looking spots, and only 15 names go on the sheet.
Who do you feel will win? Since we're not on together, Rory Kavanagh feels that Armagh are the slight favourites, but he obviously hopes Donegal can find something to turn that around. But what's your own take on it? You want to be Charlie Vernon, the man who played on the second last Armagh team to win Ulster, but how do you feel it will go?
Listen, it's difficult to call. I do think there's a huge motivational factor for Armagh, even though, yes, they're all Ireland champions going into it, and you think, right, listen, but like Kieran will be pumping in those players. Listen, none of you boys have Ulster medals. Like, Ulster medals are a coveted prize. Like, and especially, I'd say the pain from last year's Ulster final defeat. Yes, the All Ireland came, but it's now past. But I'd say them boys can tap into that pain okay. Like, I'd say that defeat would have been gut wrenching for them, because especially in normal time, Armagh had serious opportunities to win the match, and they'll probably be selling it to themselves internally. Say, listen, if we really give our best here, like, we're good enough to beat these boys and show these boys that, listen, we're good enough to win. But Donegal have a serious team, and sort of good footballers all over it and plenty of quality. Like, so it is so hard to call. Like, my heart would say Armagh, like, in terms of just, I do think that wee bit of extra motivation to try and get some level of redemption for last year, but sport doesn't go like that, in terms of there's no guarantees, and Jim McInnes will have his homework done, and Armagh's in for a difficult day no matter what. Like, it'll be a big challenge, but I'd say it'll just be I'd say it comes down in front of the goals. Who's willing to take the shots at the right time? Who's willing to get take their chances, take their opportunities when they get them? And then whoever can get a goal, possibly two. Like, you're talking about, Donegal haven't got that many goals as far as you know.
No, they haven't. It's sort of been put in front of them a few times as well. That hasn't been the case. So,
aye, but so these 2 pointers, like, if you boys like Thompson and McBrady hanging about the arc, and Murphy and these boys, like, that's well within their range. Like, so
we are probably selling it down the line of another version of the Connacht final. Padraig Joyce says it's going to come down to whoever's the most composed towards the end. So, Rory Kavanagh and Charlie Vernon, thanks a million for your time. You haven't been able to separate the teams too well, which is not a surprise. So, thanks a million for your time, Charlie. On Monday, we will be back for a review show from Clonus, talking about how the Ulster title was won. Did it go to penalties? All those things. And thanks again to our sponsors, the Everglades Hotel. And we'll see you all back on Monday. Charlie, thanks a million for your time. Enjoy the game. Maybe bump into you.
100%. Thank you. Cheers, Michael.